Okay, here we go. There are exactly 3 weeks left in the NHL regular season. The Leafs have been struggling. They're anything but playoff ready right now, no doubt about that. But here's a crazy thought, and stick with me on this one just for a minute before you write me off. Is it time for the Leafs to actually embrace certain aspects of the slide? Because there could be at least one very significant upside to it. For a while now, it's been a virtual lock. The Leafs are set to face either the Bruins or the Panthers in the opening round of this year's Stanley Cup playoffs, and we all know how that's gone for them in the past. But now, there's a very real shot they might be able to avoid those two nemesis in round one entirely. And given their track record against Boston and Florida, how good would that be for the Leafs? Make no mistake, the Leafs didn't choose this slump. Since March the 1st, their record is 16th in the NHL, barely over 500. It's so bad, Sheldon Keefe has taken to ripping his team publicly, calling them immature, among other things. And make no mistake, they got to figure this out and right the ship before they open up the Stanley Cup playoffs. But maybe, just maybe, they can actually embrace certain aspects of the slide. And maybe they can benefit from it. Since Tampa beat Boston last night, the Lightning are now just 2 points behind the Leafs for third in the Atlantic Division. If the Leafs let Tampa slip by them and Toronto fell to the first wild card, there's a chance the Leafs could open the Stanley Cup playoffs against the Rangers and not Boston or Florida. And the Leafs took 2 of 3 from the Rangers during the regular season. If you're a Leafs fan, what would you rather do? Battle to finish third in the Atlantic and virtually guarantee yourself a first-round matchup with either the Bruins or the Panthers? Or would you be okay to slip to the wild card and maybe avoid both those two in round one? Of course, the only reason this is an issue is because of the divisional and wild card playoff format we now play under. Under the old 1 versus 8 format, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because under the old format, teams were rewarded significantly better for what they did during the regular season. This new system was created in part to foster rivalries and reduce travel. It's made for some great first-round showdowns in the playoffs, but because so many of the top teams meet so soon, too many good teams have been eliminated far too early. And just to be clear, while the Leafs are where this conversation started, they're certainly not the only team with reason to grumble about this system. If the playoffs started today, Boston, Florida, Vancouver, Colorado, and Winnipeg would all get way tougher opponents today than they would have under the old system. The irony is, other than the Canucks, the rest are essentially getting punished for playing the regular season in a stronger division. Now, some of you may be saying, does it really matter who you face in the opening round? If you're going to win the cup, you have to beat everybody anyway. I would argue it absolutely does matter who you have to open the playoffs against. The postseason is supposed to gradually weed out the weaker teams in the early rounds and build up to best on best until there's only one team left standing. But as it is right now, we often see the best matchups early and the playoffs begin to fizzle out as they move along. That's not the way this is supposed to be. So, what could some of these matchups look like under the old system instead of this system? If the playoffs started today under the old 1 versus 8 format, the Leafs would get the Carolina Hurricanes in the opening round. They'd be facing Carolina, the 4th place team in the conference, instead of the 2nd or 3rd best team. Can you imagine how different the Leafs would feel if they were getting ready for a playoff matchup with the Carolina Hurricanes rather than preparing for another date with the Bruins or the Panthers in the postseason? And in the West, if the playoffs started today, the Jets, who have the 3rd best record in the conference, would have to open against the Colorado Avalanche under this system. That's their reward for finishing 3rd in the West, having to face one of the Stanley Cup favorites? And how about the Vancouver Canucks? Since they're currently 2nd in the conference, under the old format, Vancouver would have had to open against the 7th place Kings. Instead, if the playoffs open today under the current format, Vancouver would have to open against the Predators, the hottest team in the entire NHL over the last month. So here we are. Exactly 3 weeks left in the regular season and living in the world of the division and wild card playoff system to set the playoff matchups. Let's get back to our original premise now. Should the Leafs embrace this slide? They still have their fate in their own hands. They face Tampa 2 more times this season, next week in Toronto, and then on the final game of the regular season in Tampa. So that game could very well decide who finishes third and who goes in as the wild card. If you're a Leafs fan, how do you think your team should handle the next 3 weeks? If you're a fan of the Canucks, Jets, Bruins, Panthers, Avs, and your team is getting shortchanged under this system, what do you think of the format? Is it time to go back to the 1 versus 8 playoff format where teams really do get rewarded for what they do in the long 82-game regular season schedule? You've heard from me. Now it's time to hear from you. I'm really curious what you have to say about all this.